Hey, it's Matthew Todd and welcome to Lesson 3. In the last lesson, I wanted to look kind of lower level detail of some of the things you might encounter when using testing for purpose in more complex systems. In this lesson, I want to take a step back and talk about how to introduce testing for purpose into either your existing or new projects. If you've completed the coding exercise that we set, I hope you've seen how for new projects you can adopt the strategy of testing for purpose on day one. And yes, there'll be many decisions you have to make around test frameworks, etc. But using the test statements that we introduced in the last module, we can make this decision-making process easy for you, so you can define exactly how you want the different types of tests you have to work. So then, I hope that you can immediately start with a real test-driven approach, using testing for purpose as a way to structure and think about your tests for your new projects. And as your application becomes more complex, you can use the different types of test doubles that we discussed in the last lesson, ensuring that each test is only responsible for validating a single specific piece of behaviour. And for existing projects, for so-called legacy projects, you may think this is going to be harder to achieve, to apply testing for purpose to these projects. Even if you do have tests already in place in these projects though, they may be more complex or bloated and testing many things, directly and indirectly in each test. And this kind of thing can make working on these existing tests much more difficult for legacy applications. So for existing code bases, when introducing testing for purpose, there are a few things that I could recommend you try. The first would be to ensure that when needing new tests or changes to existing tests, I would find a way to differentiate the tests using testing for purpose from your existing tests. It could be something as simple as having them in a different directory, that would work. This is just so that when anyone looks at the tests, they know exactly what to expect, whether they're following the testing for purpose approach or not. And gradually over time, as areas of your application change, the number of tests in the new location would increase, replacing the existing tests until none of the older tests remain. I wouldn't try to rush and migrate all of the tests at once though, but just avoid working on the older tests and create new tests whenever the situation arises. So as you need to work on different areas of the system, these new tests will be created. There's no point in migrating tests for the area of the system that's not changing. So as you start to work on the new tests, using the strategy of testing for purpose, one thing to bear in mind, as we mentioned briefly before, is that test complexity with testing for purpose is a reflection of application complexity. Given that we know how to use different types of test doubles, as we talked about in the last lesson, with each test responsible for verifying a single specific piece of behaviour, the size and complexity of any given test method is going to be a direct reflection of the complexity of the application you're trying to test. And especially with systems that have been around for a while, grown organically over time, you may find that even when using testing for purpose, your tests are a lot longer than you'd like them to be. Now when you do encounter that with your existing code bases, it can be quite disheartening, feel quite painful, or annoying to have to work on them. But if you do stick to the strategy of testing for purpose, these tests can still be very, very useful and serve as a foundation that's going to enable you to refactor and reduce the complexity of your application over time, using the exact same techniques we talked about in Module 3. The thing to remember is take a minimally invasive approach, recognise what the size of the test methods is telling you, and ensure each test is only responsible for verifying a single piece of behaviour, and recognise what this is showing you before you address any refactoring work. In this case, the test can serve as a lens, allowing you to see the complexity of the different areas of your application. You can then take a decision based on the application complexity, in conjunction with the areas of the application that are likely to change more often, likely to be under more frequent change, more likely to change due to new requirements, and you can focus on refactoring the areas of the application that are going to provide the most benefit to you. So reduce complexity in the areas of the codebase that are going to change more often. This is going to give you the most benefit. So as you do this refactoring, again using testing for purpose as a foundation, you will then start to see both the complexity of the application and size of your application and test reduce. So to summarise, the key things to remember when introducing testing for purpose into an existing code base are: don't let the size or complexity of the tests put you off sticking to testing for purpose. Remember to make use of the right kinds of test doubles, and recognise what the tests are telling you about the complexity of your code base. Having tests created using testing for purpose will enable you to refactor safely. So refactor the areas that are going to give you the most benefit in the short term. So I'll leave it here for this lesson, I look forward to seeing you in our next and final lesson.